He has that innate talent of even the most difficult times, giving comfort, giving solace, bringing stability. In my 64 years, there are people I've known that have passed away, and there's been Tony that has been there to comfort the family and the loved ones, sometimes the most difficult times of their lives. He could better this community as a public servant, but bring people together, even people with divergent thoughts and philosophies, but in the end, bringing enough comfort, enough stability to a situation that there's a consensus and then resolution and progress then is made. So, I'm so excited. I've seen what a great job Tony's done now back in the legislature. But I do believe that with him as governor, that ability to bring people together, to bring folks even with different perspectives together, it's what this island needs. God bless Atacaubo 2026. God bless Guam.
I'm Tony Atta, and I approve this message.
Access to medical care is becoming more and more of an issue here in Guam, and it doesn't even matter if you have the ability to pay. It's getting harder to see a doctor, to get an appointment, or to get the specialty care that you need. So I want to show you a growing solution to a growing problem. They're going to go out of their way to help find you a solution. And they've been growing their clinical services. Aside from this place looking and feeling homely, like this is their waiting area. Like, I don't think that people really understand that they do full clinical services here. Like, this is one of their clinical rooms. Look how nice it is. You can get your vision exam here. So do you need to see an OBGYN, get family medicine done, internal medicine done? This is all stuff that's done here at the Total Guam Foundation. And just to tell you again, this place is not for profit. This is the psychologist's office. Yes, they have a psychology department. They also do psychiatry. It's an entire mental health department that they have here on top of all the other clinical services that they provide. If you need medical care, if you're having problems getting a doctor, getting an appointment, call the Todu Guam Foundation at 649-TODU or 649-8638. I have 0 sense of urgency. That is the typhoon's fault. My name is Troy Torres. It is now 11:29 a.m. on Wednesday, July 15, 2026. This is the morning news analysis, the Wednesday news analysis. And while this is better than yesterday when I started the morning news analysis at, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. When I started the morning news analysis at, I think, 12:30 p.m., which was not in the morning, of course. This is a marked improvement. However, I did promise you yesterday that I was going to have this show at its regularly scheduled hour, which is 8 a.m. But there's a problem. So I know this is very unprofessional of me, and I know that I need to get it together and snap out of it. But my mental health is such that when I'm thrown off of a routine, and I held a routine for quite some time this year, and I was very committed to an 8 a.m. shows and 7:30 p.m. shows. Then the typhoon came and it threw off the routine. And my mental health is such that when my routine is thrown off, it takes, first of all, it endangers me, it puts me in a danger zone with my bad habits of the past. And, thanks be to God and with God's grace that, the past several times I've been thrown off routine, that hasn't happened, right? But one of the things, and as I get older, it's a thing as well that I'm realizing is that I also I build myself up in these routines to have a sort of rhythm in life, and that rhythm, because I'm also naturally uptight, involves a high sense of urgency in everything. It lends to my stress level and anxiety, and it lends to my weight gain and all this stuff, right? But when I'm knocked off of a routine, I normally don't know what to do, or I just sort of put my like those birds with the long necks that dip their heads into the sand to get away. It feels like to get away the world. That's kind of what I do, right? I just dip my head in the sand. I know there's a process for getting back into a routine, but I get weak about it. I would rather sleep all the time that I wasn't sleeping because I was working or because of a high sense of urgency. I feel like I'm making it up now. And so long story short, because it's already a long story, I did not develop a sense of urgency when I woke up this morning and I was like, oh, I have a show to do at 8 a.m. Let me just lollygag everywhere. And it took me this long to gather up the strength. And I don't even have a sense of urgency, but to start this show, it's like, I don't want to do this today. And I know that it's so I am on schedule to have the evening show at 7:30 p.m. on the dot, as I'm supposed to tonight. And pray for me, and I'll pray for me as well, that starting tomorrow morning, my sense of urgency comes back. My name is Troy Torres. It is now 11:32 a.m. on July 15. That's a Wednesday, 2026. And there are a couple of things that I want to talk to you about today. One is the legislature has been in session regarding the budget. This is the most important thing that the legislature does, right? I know throughout the rest of the year, we only know the legislature as being that group of senators, some of whose names we know, others we had no idea that they were senators because we feel like they're not doing any work, right? Or they're at the very least they're not in the media, or they're not social media savvy enough to let us know what it is that they're doing. But aside from the budget, we normally think of senators as these people who go to funerals and to evening functions in order to be glorified instead of God, so that they can be known as the senators who are there and in the room, and they can be given that first class treatment just because they are senators or governor or lieutenant governor or whatever, right? So the budget really is their time to shine and to let us know that they are working. And it just so happens to come about right before an election. I mean, every 2 years, right before an election. So, we tend to see a side of senators that we don't really see prior to that. This is a very important budget. Every budget's important, right? But this is this budget debate has brought up some significant questions about the future of the island, that deals with whose responsibility is what and who pays for the privilege of doing business in this island, considering the military buildup and all the people who have come in, all the corporations that have come in to make a piece, to take a piece of the pie from this paradise, a pie that is being used to do things that have caused economic benefit, yes, for a few people, but has caused economic damnation for many, particularly for homeowners and renters, which is all of us who are in the upper, middle, lower middle class, or in poverty, and which is the vast majority. This is like 90% of this island, right? And so a debate has come up about the business privilege tax. And everything kind of revolves around this because the business privilege tax is one of the largest slices of the revenue pie. And the debate revolves around a promise that the Republican lawmakers made to voters back in 2024 to reduce the BPT from 5% to 4%. They've met that promise halfway in 2026 by reducing the BPT to 4.5%. Now, for fiscal year 2027, they are looking to complete their promise to voters. And to be clear, this is not just a promise to the Chamber of Commerce or to the big businesses. This is a promise that these senators made to the voters of Guam. So it's not an insignificant thing for one or all or some of them to go back halfway on that promise. We could question why were they ethical in making the promise to begin with, but on the issue of whether people should keep their promises, I think that, reasonable everyday people would agree that if you are a person of your word, you will keep a promise. You are a good person if you keep your promise, so long as that promise is not keeping that promise doesn't hurt other people, or cause harm. And I think that's really the big question here, right? Is harm and equity, harm and doing what is right versus what is wrong. And I really didn't care about this issue actually prior to last week. And the issue just propped up as we were recovering from Super Typhoon Bobby here in Guam. Now that most people have power and their data is better, this is an opportunity for us to go back to see what it is that these senators were talking about as they decided that they were going to keep the promise of rolling back the BPT to 4%. The budget deliberations are not done. They're in the expenditure section of things, but when they were on the revenue side of things, and then when they were discussing the BPT, and there were so many issues that were brought up, and uh, as I watched some of this stuff, right, I was dismayed that there seemed to be a rush to get through things and to not allow senators to bring up very relevant, notable objections and arguments against reducing the BPT to 4%, and also, and at the same time, arguments to reduce the BPT, though I didn't see much cutting off of the senators who were in favor of reducing the BPT. The cutting off was happening more on the opposition to that. Anyway, over the past couple of days, part of the shows here I've been to bring to you portions of this debate, and I wanted to do the same today. So today, what I wanted to concentrate on was the section of the argument where they started talking about all the different services, the public services that the government will abscond on. It's being argued, right? You just take these things at face value when they're being said by senators, because these things have not been validated, have not been verified. I just want you to understand that as well. But the arguments being made that the government will abscond on some pretty critical public services if the revenues don't come in from these large corporations, because we're going to reduce their BPT from 4.5 to 4%. So I want to bring that section to you. And the other thing that I want to bring to you is, hold on, where is that? Oh, that's right. A conversation about Jesse Lujan's bill. So Senator Jesse Lujan, he wants to pass a law that would appropriate $300,000 to the Guam Economic Development Authority to conduct an independent study on what to do about Guam Visitors Bureau. I want to talk about that and bring to you some news about a very interesting hire over at GVB that should make us question what the hell is going on over at GVB. Stick to us. Stay tuned. We will have this conversation, and we'll start with that on the other side of the commercial break. Stick with us.
Good Morning Show with Troy Torres is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
Hello and good morning to you all. To those of you joining us live on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and to those of you who will be watching the replay on either of those platforms, thank you so much. And to those of you commenting, I see all of your comments. Good morning and hello, everyone. And thank you so much for joining. My name is Troy Torres. I obviously need a haircut. It is now 11:40. I'll try to get that over at Royalty Cut soon. It's 11:40 a.m. on Wednesday, July 15, 2026, and we're going to talk about Guam Visitors Bureau. Now, I think if you've been paying attention to the news since, and you didn't even have to pay attention to the news. Actually, if you've been living on Guam since 2019, you understand, you have great context and perspective about what has happened to our economy. You didn't even have to have paid attention to the news to understand this context and to have this perspective. That's my dog, Lila, by the way. She's my favorite. 2019, I think, was our best tourist year ever, like our highest arrivals. And then, of course, the pandemic came, and that screwed a lot of things over. And then other things happened. Right? The value of the won and the yen depreciated against the value of the US dollar, making things more expensive in the United States, especially here in Guam and in the CNMI for Korean and Japanese visitors. So, of course, naturally, they're like, if they were on a budget and they were trying to figure it out, they're like, not America. Let's go to another resort destination. Let's go to Bali or Thailand or Vietnam, or let's vacation within Japan or within Korea, or to Japan or to Korea. And so all of these different options started to come about. GVB, which was tasked over the decades to be the venue through which the public and private sector work together to market Guam and to be on top of things, on top of the marketing and the visitor trends and all of that stuff, right? From the pandemic forward, they had a job to do. And we trusted them to do this job. So much so that the legislature allowed GVB during these years of economic and tourism recovery to spend at these phenomenal rates, tens of millions of dollars annually, taking money from the hotel occupancy tax that went into the tourist attraction fund and using that money for this, that, and the other thing. And it has been this, that, and the other thing that they have spent that money on for the past several decades. Not much has changed in the way that GVB conducts itself. They have these off-island trips where they send all these different people. They go to these different fairs at different places in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, which all kind of makes sense, kind of. Then they go to the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Las Vegas, Florida, Australia. They go to all these different places where it's like, I'm not understanding what this is, unless it's, except that it's just a vacation for our tourism officials to go and be tourists somewhere else using public funds. There's even allegations in the federal complaint that on these trips, our public officials, at least some of them, are using public funds to go and frequent brothels in what is called a broad culture of sexualized misconduct over at Guam Visitors Bureau. So even if you haven't been paying attention to the news over the past 8 years, you understand that tourism sucks, that GVB has failed to do its job, and that maybe GVB is an antiquated organization. And what are we doing spending tens of millions of dollars annually on this antiquated organization? I'll tell you this is a new story I'm working on. This should make some of you not very happy. On top of all of the traveling that GVB is doing, which yields absolutely nothing for us, on top of this federal complaint, on top of Jane Doe's allegations of this broad culture of sexualized misconduct, sexual assault, sexual harassment, cover-up, institutional cover-up, EEOC issues, all these different things, right? On top of everything that we already know about Guam Visitors Bureau, they have decided, so they hired Regine Lee as the president and CEO or general manager or whatever, right? Whatever it's called in the staffing pattern. They hired a deputy general manager to take the place of Jerry Perez, because Jerry Perez was the former vice president or deputy general manager. They hired a guy named Frank Ariola, very nice guy. Been part of the private sector for a long time. So obviously qualified, at least in terms of human resources and resource management, because he used to run, I think, PAC tours or something like that, right? Anyway, they replaced Jerry Perez with him. And I thought Jerry Perez retired. But according to Guam Visitors Bureau's staffing pattern, even though the board already has hired a general manager and a deputy general manager has been hired to replace Jerry Perez, according to the staffing pattern, has been hired as a senior advisor or something advisor and mentor over at Guam Visitors Bureau at more than $100,000 annually. And so we're going to do the work to ask, what are the duties and responsibilities? How was this person hired? How was this position created? Where did this, whose idea was it to create this position? Why does this position need to exist when there's already a general manager and a deputy general manager? And if it was necessary to get a mentor who has been a part of the visitor industry for all of these decades that we now understand are behind us, a very different era that we have left and that the global tourism industry now is in, we're hiring that guy as the mentor. If he was necessary in order to move things forward, then why did we hire Regine Lee and Frank Areola? And this goes into a whole discussion that Senator Jesse Lujan wants to have. So I think it was yesterday. Yeah, I think it was yesterday. July 13th. So 2 days ago. Jesse Lujan, he introduced, I kind of hate it when senators do this. And Congress does this too. They make these acronyms and they make things fit into these acronyms just so that they can be clever about things. But he introduced a bill to fund the GVB Review of Effectiveness, Accountability, Leadership, Internal Governance, and Needs Study, or the acronym REALIGN Study. Clever, I guess. He wants to introduce this legislation would appropriate $300,000 from the Tourist Attraction Fund to GITA to procure and to oversee an independent third-party review of Guam Visitors Bureau. According to Senator Lujan's release, the study would review GVB's organizational structure, management practices, governance framework, internal controls, staffing and personnel structure, procurement and contracting practices, financial management, program effectiveness, market strategy, destination management role, and overall alignment with Guam's current and future tourism needs. All sounds great. All sounds wonderful, right? Well, let me read a little bit more before I opine. The proposal comes after extensive oversight, stakeholder input, and growing concern over the state of Guam's tour visitor industry. That's an understatement. Tourism supports the livelihoods of at least 45,000 individuals on Guam, including workers and families connected to hotels, restaurants, transportation providers, retail shops, tour operators, cultural practitioners, small businesses, and government services. Don't forget massage parlors. That's like if there was any type of shop that outnumbered any other type of shop in Tumon, it would be massage parlors. So Senator Lujan, don't forget about the massage parlors, please. So anyway, here's the thing. On top of, I get it. I understand. I agree with the motivation that Senator Lujan has here. I agree, and I am glad that he wants something to change over at GVB. I agree it needs to be... I agree there needs to be some sort of an independent review. But also, isn't that why we have an Office of Public Accountability? Shouldn't the independent reviews by the OPA be enough? And everything that the OPA has told us already that is wrong with GVB, and everything that we know because we have common sense and we are Guamanians, we are citizens of this island who partake in an economy that has been driven down by failures in tourism and failures of GVB, we all understand by way of reason that GVB is an absolute failure, right? And that anyone who wants to continue to hold on to GVB as an institution is either living in some fantasy of a glory day or is somehow benefiting from GVB as an institution. And I would imagine everybody who loves to travel with GVB, everyone who is employed by GVB, no offense to any of them, they're the ones who I know are very nice people, right? And I'm not saying that they should lose their government jobs. They should be absorbed into something, I think, that resembles an institution that actually works to do the things to get tourists to come here and to want to come back, right? Something like that should absolutely exist, because if tourism is our top export, it's something that we need to harness and to grow back into something beneficial to those of us here on the ground, to households throughout this island who have relied on this type of an economy, right? But I'm not sure that a study from GITA is the best way to go about this. And I'm wondering why the legislature won't just make the decisions that are so obvious that need to be made, and why we have to wait for some so-called independence. Let me tell you this. You know, back in, I think it was, well, I know it was back in 2010 or 2009, actually, when then Senator Eddie Calvo is running for governor. And he's like, you know, I want to, if you elect me governor, what I want to do is introduce something called Classrooms to Careers. It ended up being called Imagine Guam a few years later when he actually did this, when he actually implemented this. But at the time, he was like, it's going to be called Classrooms to Careers. And what we're going to do is we're going to gather the community together, and the community is going to drive this effort that is going to realign public education with the careers of the future. And this was a very important part of that whole thing. He didn't talk about the Chamber of Commerce. He didn't talk about the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association, or the Society for Human Resources, or the Guam Legislature, or any of the existing nonprofit organizations. He didn't talk about any of them. He said, I want to bring the community together. So by the time Imagine Guam, it was renamed Imagine Guam, came around in 2015, he purposely did not invite people and institutions who over the decades have been given the opportunity and the responsibility by the government to come up with the master plans of the government. Because for years and years and years, governors had always invited the same type of people to the table. And they were generally from the Chamber of Commerce. They were generally called the titans of industry, or the captains of industry. And the reason Eddie Calvo, who himself was the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce back in the early 90s, did not want to invite these type of people to the table, and did not want to call them as part of the community, but instead invited people really from all walks of life throughout the island, including students. The reason he wanted to invite them and not the Chamber of Commerce type people is because for years, for decades, the Chamber of Commerce people were recommending the same reforms, which were hardly reforms. They were just tweaks in these so-called master plans that were never implemented because they never made sense, that just benefited people in the, or companies in the Chamber of Commerce. No real change, no real reform. So I have to ask, are we going to spend $300,000 for Gita in this instance to invite these same people who have been part of the visitor industry, or knowledgeable of, or working within the visitor industry, and all they know is how the visitor industry has worked and has rocked over the decades that are now behind us, an era that is gone? Are these the same people who are going to provide this independent analysis of GVB? Because if it is, let me tell you what's going to happen. After that $300,000 is spent on whoever this is, we're going to get a multi-page report that says a whole lot, where there's going to be a whole lot of repetition. And it's going to try to convince us that what they're offering in this review is some type of reform or phenomenal change, when all it really is GVB 2.0, the same structure, no real changes, just putting lipstick on a pig, maybe some changes in governance, changes in titles, but no real change to what GVB does, or what GVB is expected to do, or what GVB uses tens of millions of dollars annually to do. And unless this bill has some teeth, like the legislature tells the independent contractor to do things that we know need to be done, I don't think this thing is really going to go anywhere. We're going to waste another year, and we're definitely going to waste $300,000. I want to be clear, though, that I agree with Senator Lujan that something needs to be done. I agree with him that GVB needs to change. I don't agree with his level of aggression. I opened the show talking about my struggle trying to regain my sense of urgency from losing my routine because of the whole, like the lull from the typhoon and all that. But here I am saying this about Senator Lujan and all of our legislators. Be more aggressive, have a greater sense of urgency about this matter, and do what absolutely needs to be done. What we've known for the past couple of years has needed to be done with GVB, and that is dismantle it and rebuild something else that makes sense. Because GVB is an absolute failure. And the fact that every time they are called to the carpet by either the media or in questioning before the Guam legislature, their only answer is to blame everything and everyone else for the failures in tourism tells you what an absolute failure that place is. When we come back from this commercial break, from the next commercial break, I want to bring you the portion of the legislative debate on the revenues of the upcoming budget, where senators started to talk about how the government, if it doesn't get revenues that from the 4.5% BPT, because the legislature wants to reduce the BPT to 4%, would be absconding on some certain critical public services, at least according to what these senators are arguing. We'll get to that on the other side of this commercial break. Stick with us. Welcome back to the show. It is now 11:58 a.m. on Wednesday, July 15, 2026. My name is Troy Torres. I know I need a haircut. I will schedule that with Jessup Collins over at Royalty Cuts. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget that the primary election is on August 1, and that's just 16 days away. That's just a little over 2 weeks away. For as long as I've been in politics, I don't think there's any one reason why more than 50% of the population eligible to vote does not go to vote in the primary election. I think there are a bunch of reasons. One is it's a Saturday. It's kind of difficult to get people to do things on a Saturday. There are some people, unfortunately, it's hard to get them to take a shower on a Saturday. What more go and vote, right? I have to tell you guys that laziness is contributing to the demise of our society, because primary elections, the person who you think you're going to vote for in the general might not make it into the primary election if you don't go and vote. And I think we've seen that happen a few times where the best candidates get kicked out of the primary election simply because the ones who have the resources and who work really hard, they're not always the best candidates, and they end up winning because they're the ones who work to get people to go to the polls because they had the money for it, or they had the incumbency or whatever, right? And then there are other things, like there are people who don't want to participate in or don't want to have to choose between a Republican or Democrat ballot because it's a primary election. But people, this is not about a party. This is an open election. The public pays for this. You have a right to vote in this election, even if you are not a Democrat or Republican. And I know that there are a lot of people who don't identify as Democrat or Republican. That's fine. Vote in whichever. This is your right to vote. Do not give up on this right to vote. I don't even know why we have primary elections. Honestly, we should just do it like the CNMI does, like hold a general election. Everyone who wants to run runs in the general election. And if there's a 50% plus one threshold and it's not met, then you do a runoff election. It's that simple. Like that's what exists in the Organic Act. The Organic Act doesn't say anything about a primary election. We just made it that much more difficult for voters because we wanted to promote, I don't know, the parties. It's just stupid. Almost everything that's done in the government, no matter if it's a Republican or Democrat, typically serves some special interest, whether it's a party interest or a corporate interest or whatever, right? It's just sickening. So anyway, you know, there was speaking of those interests, right? In the heat of the debate about whether to reduce the BPT from 4.5 to 4%, there were members of the legislature who took offense. So there were some senators who were like, look, why do we have to keep bending over backward for these large corporations that are mainly carpetbaggers? They're not from Guam. They're not anchored in Guam. They're just making money off of Guam, off of this military buildup opportunity for them. They don't care about this island. So that's essentially what they were saying, right? And a couple of the members of the legislature, they were Republicans. They came back and they were like, stop talking about these people like they're big, bad corporations, like they're doing all these bad things, because here's what businesses do. And they were talking about the employment and all this stuff, right? But let me just, we keep doing favors for businesses, like the government of Guam, through law, through policies, through the implementation of law, keeps doing favors for businesses while failing to deliver public services for people. There is a greater emphasis on normalizing corporate welfare through the law and through tax policy while demonizing public support for the poor. We've been told for the past, 4 decades now, almost 5 decades now, that moving the wealth more and more into the hands of the wealthy will somehow trickle down to everyone who pulls themselves up by their bootstraps and does the hard work. Well, we have even disemboweled worker protections by using the law to neuter unions here. And all we've done, because I don't know about you, but almost everyone I've seen, and I know that there are some lazy people, yes, and I know that there are some people who would rather feel more comfortable relying on public assistance, and there are some of those, yes, absolutely. But most people who I know, almost everybody who I know, has pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. There are people, we've worked 3 part-time jobs for that minimum wage that the business community always tells us is bad for business. And all we are, after all of this time, being told about this trickle-down effect, all we are is poorer, older, and tired. We are now on the cusp of the middle class disappearing into antiquity as the gap between the rich and the poor grows. And the answer from our senators is to give even more to the rich, and not just to the rich, but the richest among us. The question came up by senators in defending these large corporations. Why do we demonize, or why do we call them the big bad businesses? They're not big bad businesses, and I want to challenge that. While yes, there are honest businessmen, absolutely. Yes, there are business people and shareholders who are just doing their jobs and working hard, absolutely. But you cannot believe in corruption, that there is corruption, if you don't believe that there are big bad businessmen. So in order for corruption in public services to exist, you need the other side of the equation, and that is the big bad businessmen. You ask any of these big businessmen about what it's like to survive in the corporate world, and any of them who are being honest and earnest with you will tell you that they swim with sharks. That is not a term of endearment. So, senators, spare me your outrage about people talking down the corporate class. While there are honest and ethical businessmen, sure, many of our problems in this island are from the big bad business people who actually do exist, and for decades have torn down our economy for their own benefit without caring about the rest of us. And the proof are the conditions that we're living in. So unless you believe that we're just all lazy and not pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, then the answer to the reason for our economic demise and the conditions, the squalor that we find ourselves living in, the increasing poverty that we find ourselves living in, is the advantage that those in the upper classes have taken against the rest of us. So my question again is, why would we give them more by giving them tax breaks? Haven't they had enough? Like hotels. Why do they have QCs? And why do we have an entire agency called GVB gathering all this money to use it on whatever? Marketing what the hotels should be spending their money marketing, because they're the ones who are trying to get people to fill their rooms. Why is it the public that's doing this? Why are some of the largest corporations on this island not paying any taxes at all? Why are there entire exemptions for certain industries that just so happen to have family members over the decades elected into public office, sometimes into the highest offices that make all the decisions about these things? I think the time has come and gone, and this is a perfect time to remind everyone that the election is on August 1st. For us as voters to look all of these people in the eye and be like, BS. Stop talking about this like it's just good for us to give everything away to the richest people and the corporate class, as though that's somehow going to be good for the rest of us, because all it's been doing is coming at our expense. And I think that there are arguments that were made in the legislature. This was on July 12th. Oh gosh, they were in session on a Sunday. I hope they went to church. I want you to hear some of what the arguments were when they were talking about the revenues and the need to keep revenue levels at a certain level so that they could fund critical services. And let's pay attention to what they are saying now.
Committee of the Whole is back in order. We have Office of Finance and Budget with us. Senator Burnett, you're recognized.
Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to the Office of Finance and Budget. Director Guerrero, if you could go over again how you do with the EBR comparative breakdown with what's in the sub-bill. We're on Chapter 3, Part 3, Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center.
Okay,
I'd like to also remind you that you're still under oath, right? We don't need to swear you in every chapter.
You got it.
Okay.
We're ready. Chapter 3, Part 3. That will be Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. Your FY26 appropriation level was $25.2 million. For FY27, their appropriation level is the request is $30.3 million, which is an increase of $5.1 million over the FY26. OFB,
gave them an increase of
gave them an increase of 2.2 over the FY26 level, and that would be the total that you see here on the on their budget request.
Okay, so Mr. Carlson in his list of concerns about Substitute Bill 266 had cited reduced funding for GIBWIC, 2.9 million reduction versus EBR will impact contracts for patients to include Level 2 residential services, drop-in and resource center for homeless, Guam Mommy, youth therapeutic group home, the Laddie Treatment Center, inpatient meals, doctors on-call fees, medications, and medical supplies. So do you care to respond to that?
Yes, Senator. Again, you know, we contacted basically the director, Larissa Pingolina.
Oh, the director this time.
Fortunately, this time it's the director.
All right.
Called. And we spoke to her, and at the end of the conversation, she said that she will work whatever she has, whatever's being appropriate in the law.
They seem to say that a lot, huh? Whatever you give us, we'll be okay with it.
Whatever she says.
Yeah. Do you read the news?
Yesterday,
Mr. Guerrero?
Pardon?
Do you read the news or you watch the public hearings?
Oh, no, Senator, I'm just saying, in our conversation with her, discussing her FY27 appropriation level, at the end of the conversation, she said, Steve, we'll work with whatever levels you provide us in the appropriation bill. That was her response to us.
When was that?
I think that conversation, Senator, actually happened about 2 weeks ago in the preparation of the budget, development of the budget level. And I believe in this case, the director actually called our office. And that's how the conversation started.
Okay, because there was a hearing and GIBWIC had sought $4 million because of federal funding cuts under the Trump administration that will impact child care development grants, mental health fund, what's in jeopardy with the loss of this $5.3 million in federal funding, crisis response, drug treatment, family stabilization service, the mobile crisis response team, which responds to suicide, the children's home services, autism services, and therapeutic group homes. And this was all over the news in the beginning of June. That's why I ask if you read the news or watch the hearings, because you seem to be having these conversations with representatives from the agencies, directors in some cases, and you're saying they're telling you this, they're telling you that, but they're actually contacting senators and they're saying that you're not being honest with the conversations that you had with them. They're saying that you're misrepresenting what they said or flat out making it up. So, I mean, I've just about had it. You know, we've asked many times to get the different representatives from the agencies in here, and this is exactly why, because you're telling us one thing, and they're telling us the opposite.
Well, Senator, whatever conversation they have with whoever they have with, I mean, that's their prerogative. My conversation with the directors,
yeah, but
the financial people,
Mr. Guerrero,
like that,
I mean, you brought up
I take that
Mr. Kinblah's dispensa. You brought up Mr. Kinblah's, and he's messaged members of the body that say he doesn't even know what you're talking about.
Well, Senator,
so that's why I asked, do we need to swear you in at the beginning of every chapter, because there appears to be a disconnect from what you're telling us and what these agencies are telling us. And maybe that's why the chair and the majority doesn't want us to be able to ask these agencies questions, because what's being left out of this budget, it's shocking. Residential treatment for drug addicts, autism services, suicide mobile response. So why weren't these items included in this substitute bill? I mean, it's everybody on the island knows. about these Trump cuts and their impact to all of the different agencies.
Senator, whatever conversation goes on out there, whether it be budget hearings, oversight hearings, stuff like that, I'm sure there's validity in those conversations. But what I take to heart is my conversation when it comes to the budget.
Yeah,
And
Mr. Guerrero,
when you-
but dispensa
Can I,
tago, but
can
you're
I answer your
saying
question?
that the director
You're not
said...
allowing me to answer your question,
I'll
sir.
give you an opportunity.
Okay, go ahead.
You're saying the director said, oh, hunky-dory, we're all good. But apparently that's not the case, because there was no consideration to include funding for the services that are being jeopardized, cut, eliminated due to President Trump's federal funding cuts. So let me just re-ask the question, Mr. Guerrero. So the director said she's good with whatever you're going to give. Apparently everybody's saying that until you ask them what was actually said. So why weren't these items included in the substitute bill?
Let me remind everybody here. The executive budget for FY25, the EBR, came in at 91 million over FY26 level. 91 million. In our proposed budget, of course, we're looking to fund whatever services we can fund with the level we feel is reasonable and is going to be adopted. That revenue level included a 0.5% reduction in the BBT, which amounted to about 43 million. That alone will tell anybody that we cannot, and it's almost impossible, to fund everything at the level.
Yeah.
So
thank you for that.
Taking that into account, that's why
basically
we
you're
couldn't
saying-
fund everything at the level that the departments are asking.
Let me translate, because you still haven't answered the question, but basically what you're saying is because we chose to give another $40 million tax break to the big businesses in this budget bill, we can't afford to fund in the bill services for kids with autism, mobile suicide response team, services for those who are struggling with substance abuse. These are the people who are being cut out of the picture so that we can give another big tax break to the biggest of the big businesses. That's what you're saying, right?
Thank you, Senator. That's your time. Vice?
He could still answer the question, Mr. Chair.
Of course he can.
Yeah,
I
so
didn't
I'd
say
appreciate
don't answer
that.
the question.
Yeah. Well, you went to Vice right after, so at least give Mr.
I'm not
Guerrero
recognizing Vice. I'm
an
asking him to
opportunity.
come up here.
Yeah, well, if you could just give Mr. Guerrero the opportunity.
He will. He's ready to
All
go.
right, thank you. Oh, I'm sure he is. I just also want to remind you, you're under oath.
Oh, absolutely, Senator. I've never forgotten that, just to let you know. But what I'd also like to say is, considering the task at hand of appropriating the revenue levels we have adopted for 27, or at least we're proposing for 27, we took into consideration the department lapses. That in itself will help offset some of the costs. I've also been told that they are in the process of seeking federal grants to fund some of these programs. The only thing that they told us is that
The question, Mr. Guerrero, was why weren't the services being impacted by these
Senator,
federal funding cuts included in the budget? I know, Mr. Vice Speaker, respectfully, my time is up because he's not answering the question.
He answered your question. Thank
He
you.
didn't answer it.
He did
not answer it.
He answered your question. Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
He didn't answer it, Vice Speaker. The question was, why weren't these services funded in this substitute budget bill? That's the question, not the long story about how
Senator, if you look at the programs, some of these programs weren't requested in the FY27 budget, in the requests. Okay, we weren't informed that these programs existed. So at the time we were putting this together, how would I know to fund something if I didn't know existed? I'm asking your question. That's why they weren't funded, because we didn't know about it at the time.
Senator Dueñas, you're recognized.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Get back to a little bit of decorum here, Director. How much is GBWIC currently lapsing?
Senator, for the current, as of May, the CER report this year, they're lapsing about $903,000.
$903,000?
Yes. In September last year, in 25, they lapsed $2 million. And in the FY24 audit, they lapsed $347,000.
You indicated that there was emerging programs that GBWIC was entering into, and our discussions at OFB with them, that we would be working with them to fund those programs. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
When they receive their budget at the current level and they're lapsing, and traditionally, hasn't it been your observation that this late in the fiscal year, essentially, that'll either stay static or maybe even increase by the time the fiscal year is over?
Conceivably, Senator, if they utilize the current appropriation level, it should satisfy basically the requirements if they stick within the program and appropriation level set forth in the Budget Act. Any lapses from prior year would most likely again fall into lapses in the current fiscal year.
Meaning they basically have that budget going into next fiscal year intact. And then you increase their budget by $2 million, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Lester, I want to do this exercise just because, excuse me, I worked with him too. Steve, I want to do this exercise just because I think we can't overemphasize this. We still have, based on our levels, a $1.404 billion budget. Is that correct in terms of what's being proposed in the substitute bill?
If you include all fund sources, yes, Senator.
Steve, how hard was it when you were down at BBMR to process a journal voucher or allowances to be able to move money within agencies, categories?
Senator, we're talking about 13 years ago when I was at the Bureau of Budget. But I don't think there's much difference in its operation as we speak today. What makes a big difference is the way budgets are passed. In the past, we've had different types of budget processes that we utilize, and was finally became into law. We had line item budgeting, which restricts the movement of money between object classes. We had lump sum appropriations the way we have now, which gives basically the authority to the agency heads to utilize those funds as deemed proper and appropriate. So in terms of processing and requisition, purchase orders, contracts, and stuff like that, they come to the Bureau of Budget for one thing, for certification of funds. And normally those certification of funds are pegged against allotments that have been already released to the agencies. That is the only way the agencies can certify against these documents. They don't certify against their appropriation. They certify against allotments. And the reason why for the allotments, it's a budgetary control to make sure that the government is collecting the revenues as it anticipates to collect throughout the year. And there are mechanisms there to safeguard that control.
So, Steve, if an agency director and a fiscal officer are doing proper budgeting and managing their resources well, isn't it typical that they extrapolate what they need for their programs over a 12-month period? And isn't it typical also between department administration, depending on the agencies, maybe a 1, 2, or sometimes even a quarterly allotment schedule so that they manage their cash, what they need for that month, going throughout a 12-month period?
Absolutely, Senator. Every year, departments and agencies are required to submit an allotment schedule by October 15th to the Bureau of Budget. That allotment plan kind of plans out their expenditures throughout the fiscal year. It includes personnel services costs, supplies, materials, contracts, and utility costs to cover the costs for the 12 months going forward. Proper planning will show you that if you do it properly, you'll always have sufficient funds to cover your expenses as they come due.
So, Steve, would it matter if I'm an agency and I have a $6 million appropriation or a $3 million appropriation, but I have an allotment schedule for the programs that I have? I have that cash because it's a 12-month period. I allot to those programs for the federal match and whatever else. And if it starts to rise, what can I do?
Again, Senator, allotment schedules are pegged basically on what BBMR and Department of Administration will estimate the collection of cash to support those allotments. Bureau of Budget, when we release allotments, is based basically on the projected cash flow that comes in, which is also verified by DOA. There are going to be some times when cash don't come in, the revenues don't come in on a timely basis. They may hold the allotments, or BOA may not process them. But in terms of the departments following their allotment schedule, they will continue to. They will incur some roadblocks, and it's basically just the system, whether it be the funds not being certified on the documents, not being processed properly, the DOA, or being held up at the GSA, for whatever, or even the AG's office for contracts. But in due diligence, if they do follow their allotment schedule, they should be able to, meet all their program expenses and requirements throughout the year.
Steve, I'm going to give you a scenario. I'm the director of GBWIC. I'm watching the program and I say, wow, the first month we're doing our federal match. We need to increase because the program is being funded at this level. We're being told by our partners, hey, you've got a, $175,000 this month pegged against it, but you need $250 because that's the way it's tracking. Is it a scenario, is this foreign for me to go to my ASO and say, hey, can you call DOA? Can you do a journal voucher and make sure that you move object categories and get another allotment to us for $100,000? Is that unheard of?
Senator, again, in the scenario that you're referring to, departments are supposed to operate within the level they're authorized to operate with. Their expenses normally are pegged against the allotments that they already set forth for the 12 months going forward. What's happening here with a lot of the departments are that when they get, and I kind of always refer to it as a bonus in one fiscal year, one year they're given $1 million, $2 million as an amendment to their budget for whatever reason they received the appropriation for. So in the case of some programs, and as far as the budget is concerned, it's done through floor amendments because it's not within the budget bill. So when these floor amendments are passed, what happens is it increases the original budget ceiling that's in the S bill. For example, if a department is appropriated $1 million to a floor amendment, they're given $2 million. All of a sudden, that ceiling becomes $3 million. But the original budget was $1 million. So we go forth the next fiscal year. Instead of looking at the department's operation only at $1 million, which that's what it was for the last 5, 10 years, in 1 year, it tripled. to 1 million to 3 million. That that becomes part of the fixed cost of the agencies. Now there's an obligation. At a certain point, it's an obligation. Do we fund going forward the agency at that new level of 3 million, or do we go back and say, you know what, that was a bonus year. That was money that we had at the time. But we're back to realization and says, we cannot be spending at that rate. So we bring it back, and we'll probably fund half. Hey, the best we can do is half, okay? But it seems right now that, and that seems the thought now, is that we're not funding these agencies at the current level that they're at. But if you look at some of these programs, they've doubled or tripled their program costs in 1 year.
So, Steve, I just want to cut to the chase. So for me to be able to move money shouldn't be hard.
If you have the money within your agency, yes, you can do it.
And if I had an advance in my allotment schedule and I was tracking and I needed more money, I'd go to the governor and ask for a transfer.
The governor's transfer is a mechanism to provide additional funds to the department should those funds be needed.
You mentioned to me that on the line agencies, there's close to $20 million lapsing across all the agencies that the governor has control under.
As of the last reporting, I think was last month, I think the amount I think is closer to 18 million, but yes, that's how much money that was available as of the May CER report.
Steve, don't you think that a good chief executive, along with a good BBMR director, along with a good DOD director, with that kind of flexibility, would have no problem covering a program that is required to receive the funding to provide the services, the critical services, especially when those services are reimbursable and they raise the cap?
If you're asking me my opinion, Senator,
I hope it's yes.
My experience as, and I've been a director of a couple of departments in the past, my experience, Senator, will tell me that I will never overcommit my department to a level that is not authorized within my budget. If there are additional funds I need to provide certain services that I cannot fund within that level, there are mechanisms and options and avenues I can take to do that.
That's my point.
But I will never, ever go over my appropriation level for my agency.
So I'm a director. I'm sitting there. I look at my budget. I say, wow, I'm lapsing $900,000. I'm getting a $2 million increase. The EBR, yes, is pegged against. Okay, I guess my time is up.
Yeah, Senator,
Mr. Chairman, I yield my time, Senator Duenas.
Oh, thank you, Senator.
your 5-minute time is yielded to Senator Duenas.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, the EBR, yes, you know, they kind of met me somewhere in the halfway point because they did give me a $2 million increase. If I'm a director and I'm saying to you, Steve, that, you know, I really would like the EBR, but me and the ASO can work with that, don't you think that's what they're saying? That, okay, if we get this, we know that it's a 12-month budget. We get into the, you know, we open up the books on October 1st. We load our accounts. We start letting our federal partners and everybody else know we're ready to roll. We got the matching. Let's get going. We enter into the contracts. The contracts are there for the services. We make sure all the services are available. We get started. And we watch all the program tracks with the overall lump sum budget that I was given. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes, it is, Senator. The other thing too is that when departments obligate and contract for services, they need to also understand the long-term effect these services and requirements are going to have on the agencies. Federal grants normally are received annually. You have continuing federal grants, you have consolidated federal grants, you have non-competitive federal grants. There's so many different grants that are floating out in Guam. When we apply for the federal grants, everybody is good with it because it takes the burden off the general fund or any local funds. But once you apply for the federal grants and these federal programs come embedded as part of the services of the program or the department, nobody complains about the program. But once the funding ends, now that's the decision the government needs to decide what it's going to do. Do we go ahead and continue these programs and augment it with general fund money or any type of local fund monies? Or do we just say, you know what, we can't afford it anymore? These are the decisions that have to be made by the administration and the legislature. It's not a matter of we don't want to fund them. There are hundreds of millions of worth of federal programs out there in government of Guam right now. If half of these programs, say 50 million, should end September 30th, is the government of Guam obligated to continuously fund these programs? In my experience, there is nothing that I find in law that obligates the government of Guam to fund these programs once the federal grant expires. Not one. I have not found one. And this is the question that has been lingered in the Bureau of Budget for years. So that's why we caution the agencies. In the forefront, we always say thank you. Thank you for seeking federal funds for these programs. But you also have to understand once the federal funds die, are no longer available, who is to fund these programs? Everybody looks to the general fund. And that's what's happening, I think, in the case of Dripper. That's in the case of Dripper. They were funded through a grant that is no longer available come FY27. Now, the question is, do we continue funding this program going in FY27, knowing that there's no more federal funds? And it applies to every federal grant that is being administered in the government of Guam, no matter what agency.
Now, I know the question was posed to you a little bit snarky, but I'll ask it less snarky. You do read the news, I'm sure, and you do follow along with what's going on. The governor recently paid for $5 million worth of child care grant, right?
I read that in the media, yes.
That's what I thought. How did the governor do that?
Again, Senator, to answer that question, knowing what I know, is that she has options right now available to her.
That's what I thought.
One of the most obvious provision that she has is utilizing the governor's transfer, which is authorized in the FY26 Budget Act at a level of 50% transfer authority. Now, that 50% transfer authority is pegged on the total appropriations available in the FY26 budget that can be transferred. So, if you ask me, 5 million of what I know, what I think the estimated amount that's available for her she can transfer, it's very minute. So 5 million, although it seems like it's a big amount, compared to what she has in terms of her 50% governor's transfer, it's a small amount.
Did she have to run down here and drop a piece of paper on her desk and say, get into session right now, I need $5 million?
To my recollection, I don't think that was done.
It wasn't, because I read the news and I listen to the news too. And the governor said, I care about this program. I care about our people. And I am going to make sure that that $5 million is available. And if I need to, I'll talk to the legislature down the line, and we'll see what we need to do in terms of a supplemental appropriation. Isn't that correct?
Yes, and just to be clear, utilizing the governor's transfer doesn't require the legislative approval.
That's right. Steve, you were aware, right, when we did self-insurance, when we switched over?
I was here, yes.
Yeah. You remember that program required a significant deposit in order to be able to get the program going, and to the tune of millions of dollars, to make sure that there was the initial ability for the government to pay claims, be able to get things started. I think the audit mentioned somewhere around $33 million. Do you reflect that? I'll tell you, it's true. I think it's the 24 audit, or maybe even the 23. You remember we needed to at least have a startup fund to be able to do self-insurance?
I remember the conversation, Senator, yes.
Don't you think that's another example of money's not appropriated, but I'm the governor, and we made a decision. We're going to do self-insurance. I need money. I got a big bank full of cash right over there. I'm going to deposit that cash into this account, and I'm going to tell DOA, fire away. You could stand up your self-insurance program. You can go and negotiate with the insurance companies. You can tell them these are the terms. You can tell the employees what their share is. You can tell them, no problem with the government share. I didn't get an appropriation from the legislature, but I don't need it. I'm doing self-insurance. Self-insurance is the way we're going to do things. Do you remember? Because you were around during that time, as being the OFB director. And did we have an emergency 911 get into the committee of the whole legislature? I need money for self-insurance.
Senator, I remember several conversations regarding the self-insurance for Gov Guam, I think starting 24, if I believe, 23, 24. And one of the biggest questions that always came up was that how was the program going to be funded? We never got an answer. Nobody ever came to us, to the legislature OFB, to say, hey, is there any way you can identify X amount of money so we can do this self-insurance program in Government of Guam instead of bidding it out to 3 different insurance companies that we have to do every year, et cetera, et cetera. And if we did it in-house, we would save millions. That was the selling point of this whole Gov Guam self-insurance. And since then, Senator, I have not seen any type of request to appropriate for a self-insured Gov Guam program. How they're funding it is something they're doing it internally. Where they're getting the funding to fund this program, they're doing it internally.
Isn't that an example of how much power a governor has, that when you need funding for a program, when you need to take care of something, you can do it?
Given the provisions that are available to her or him, Senator, yes.
You know, some other remarks on the floor here, kind of chiding, and I have to say that I'm glad you said it along with me, that I remember you were in a education finance meeting. Tess, I got it. Few seconds here, so on with this. I remember you saying exactly what I said. You were quite frustrated with some of the discussion on lapses and how things were operating, and you were wondering because they were talking about not funding a program here, not funding a program there, and they didn't have money, and you said, what are you talking about? You don't have money. And you made it clear to them, you don't have a funding problem. You have an execution problem. Do you remember that?
That's correct, Senator.
Isn't $1.404 billion a lot of money?
For the size of an island like Guam, Senator, I personally believe, yes, that is a huge sum of money to an operator government this size. Yes.
And I'll close with Edward Burns' favorite quote. Senators, in the grand scheme of things, 10 million here and 10 million there, it's really little in comparison to a $1.4 billion budget. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Senator Chalayi, you're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you. I don't think it's little when you're talking about the things that we're talking about on the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. We're talking about, according to the director, a 988 lifeline, the suicide hotline, the mobile crisis response, the children's home-based services, the autism center. There was 25.4 suicides per 100,000 people on Guam, one of the highest levels in the nation. And those mostly affected people below the age of 30. There were 30,000 incidents or calls to that 988 center, according to the director. Mr. OFB director, you said you didn't know that they had these needs, but the governor's budget, when did that come in? January?
The EBR was submitted to the legislature January 31st.
In January. These were all included in that EBR. Did we have a budget hearing for the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center?
I don't believe we had a budget hearing for behavioral health.
No, they didn't. There was no hearing for them. So representations that the director said she doesn't need this money in her budget, I think are inaccurate. In fact, they were completely contradictory to what the director said in the June oversight hearing, and that was in June. And we didn't get this substitute budget until July. So there's absolutely no way we didn't know about it. She said very, very clearly, according to the news, I'm reading a KUM article, she said a few months ago, after we had already submitted our fiscal year 27 budget requests, we were informed that the Trump administration is reducing CCDF allocations to territories. The programs supported by these federal funds are not peripheral, they are core components of our behavioral health safety net. They include the 988 Lifeline, Mobile Crisis Response Team, Children's Home-Based Services, Autism Services, Family Stabilization Services that provide follow-up care after crisis, and the Therapeutic Group Home serving youth with significant behavioral health needs. This is the 24-hour home for the youth. Some of them used to live in the States, and we were able to bring them back. And to say, oh, let the governor transfer, just maybe that's possible. And maybe that we're going to show again on our audit that we spend over $29 million above the appropriation levels because we didn't appropriate enough for certain agencies to function. And then we're cutting from other agencies without a plan, just in the middle of the year. And no one knows at this time what services the governor will have to cut in order to fund these programs. I know the budget sets the priorities, and this budget says these are not a priority, but I disagree. We are in the middle of a methamphetamine crisis, suicide crisis for children. The youth in the therapeutic group home have nowhere else to go. The drop-in center for homeless that also is affected by this. very few other places to go. The level 2 residential services for adults with serious mental illness, with or without disabilities, that was in the governor's budget request. That's Guma Mommy. I think we need to show what our priorities are as a legislature, and I don't know what all the talk about was, you know, the governor can do whatever she wants. Yes, she could. But so can we. So can we prioritize what we can see in our community as being the need? And when you said that the governor funded the child care, I think we clarified with BBMR that she actually didn't, despite the news release that she funded it. No one was funded. They weren't paid. Right? Isn't that what either DOA or BBMR testified earlier in the week? So I think while we're here for a budget for the sole purpose of determining the priorities of the taxpayers' funds, how they're going to be spent, I think it should be very, very clear that this is a priority of the Guam legislature, of the people of Guam, despite what the legislature wants to say today.
Your time from Senator Parkinson. Yeah. She has declined that. Just for clarification, and we can play the tape back, I believe the DOA director said he has transferred and he is transferring the funds. Senator Perez, you're recognized.
I don't remember that, Mr. Chair, and if he was transferring it, wouldn't we have to see that? And we haven't seen any documents like that.
We can confirm, but I recall his statement exactly, that they were transferring the funds. Senator Perez, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Steve, what was the executive budget request for Guam Behavioral Health?
30.4 million, Senator.
30.4? And so this one only, for this budget, it's 21 million?
No.
You have to
Wait, what am I reading?
27. 27.4.
27 budget is 27.4.
And the EBR was 30, what did you say again?
30.4.
It's 30.4.
2 million.
Okay. So what is being cut, or where was the cuts made with this budget?
There's no cut because we're currently at
Yeah.
Blow that up, then.
These were the supplemental that we did.
They got more.
They wanted to cut for PBR.
But you didn't cut any group.
Yeah, we didn't cut this year. Just know that.
Yes, Senator, we didn't go into the programs and cut out a program. What we did is we used the baseline of what they had, make sure that we appropriated and covered fixed costs, which is personnel, utilities, etc., and then whatever else that we could fund within the level that was provided to JIPWIC is what was probably left over for contracts. Whatever they feel they want to fund out of that contract appropriation, that's up to them.
Okay, so it's a difference of how much? 2.5 million?
Well, 2.9 million.
2.9. Okay, so what the Guam Behavioral Health is saying is that they are unable to continue funding a current contract without this money. Are you aware of that? Did you have discussions with the director at all when you made this decision or when the decision was made?
I believe the discussion we had with the director was that we did discuss program requirements and we did discuss their departmental requirements. But at the end of our discussion, her response to us is that she'll live with whatever appropriation level is provided to her.
Okay, that's not what we're getting from the director. She's stating that she wasn't afforded a budget hearing, so what the impact of this cut will basically cut the level 2 residential services for adults with serious mental illness, with or without intellectual disabilities, the drop-in center. It would also cut services to the Laddie Treatment Center, which is a 24-hour youth therapeutic group home. And so this, this is going to have a direct impact on their operations and the services to the people that depend upon it. And mind you that this does not cover the capacity of the needs of our community. They're limited by the funds, limited to the amount of people they can serve, and we know that the amount of need is much greater. In fact, they have a waiting list when it comes to meth detox. They have a continual waiting list of 20 individuals. So they can't treat everybody. As you know, we're in a meth crisis, and I don't see how that, we're cutting an agency when it's, when you talk about having to move funds around, 2.9 million is significant. You're talking about a group home. You're talking about people that need this service, and to suddenly drop it from them, we're turning our backs on the most vulnerable populations. We're seeing a rise in also youth addiction. And this is the agency that can actually not only treat and rehabilitate, but they can also help with prevention. The numbers seem to have doubled since 2020 for youth. And we're not just talking about tobacco. This is also increases in meth use. How many vacancies are there in the budget, in this particular budget?
Right now, there's 39 listed in the budget, Senator.
39 individuals?
Yes.
And federal funds, what are the list of federal funds and when are they due to expire for this agency?
I'm not too sure when federal funds are going to expire for their programs, but I can get the information.
Okay, when can you do that?
I can get some time, get my staff to do it.
Okay, before the end of today?
I'm sure I can.
So the other thing that's important to know is that, there may be issues with federal funding. As you know, they withdrew some funds. We know with Guam EPA, for instance, they were defunded. And so this is a concern for many of our agencies. So we need to know how much of the funding that they use is supplemented by the federal government. And, there's a potential if the federal funds are dropped, we're going to lose services unless we can provide local funding. So that's the other question you could bring to your team, is researching what federal funds are being used and the potential for the need for covering those gaps. As far as special funds, do they have any special funds other than the Healthy Future Fund that's listed here?
Other than the Healthy Future Fund, Senator, the only other special fund they get appropriations from is from the Mental Health Substance Abuse Service Fund.
How's that tracking?
Slightly higher than this year, so we did it was 377. This year it's for 16.
The fund right now is tracking slightly higher than the FY26 level, so we adopted basically the FY27 level for the program.
Okay, what does it amount to?
The total is $416,750.
Have they asked for any kind of capital improvement? Or are they in need of capital improvement, or that's not part of the budget?
Just to let the body know, on page 56, as well as page 55, their federal programs are listed, and what general fund appropriations are going there. Section 2, detoxification rehabilitation services on 55. Section 3, focus on life suicide prevention program. Section 4, inpatient detoxification program, New Beginnings. Section 5, youth mental health first aid program. Section 6, mental health and substance abuse service fund, just so you can follow along with those programs. And the appropriations are there. That's in the budget that we gave you, the 194-page budget.
Yeah,
If
but
you're
not
going page by
everything.
page.
Not everything necessarily
Right.
is in this budget. I know.
Right.
I know that for a fact.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Just letting everyone know, because one of the programs you asked was already in the budget. Thanks.
The only appropriation asked for capital outlay in 27 was 80,000, and I believe that's to purchase vehicles.
In the budget, they do mention workload, I believe, right? In the opening of many of the divisions, if the agencies have divisions. So what was their expected workload for this particular cycle, fiscal year?
Senator, I can get back to you on that information.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Ms. Massey. Senator Parkinson, you're recognized.
Test.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in this Sunday. Always appreciate your willingness to answer questions for us. And I guess for a lot of these, because I'm hearing a common refrain about any shortages in programs, the governor could just make it work with their transfer authority. And I understand that that's a thing that we could possibly do, but I agree with the retiring speaker, one of the retiring speakers, that where we have the ability to be specific with our allocations, we should take that opportunity to do so. Because what it feels like we're doing is we have this BPT rollback that we're trying to push through. And there's these cuts that are going to have to come because of it. Steve, could we have filled a lot of these gaps if we had $120 million more? If we had $120 million more, would we be able to fill a lot of these gaps?
Hello? Hello? No, Senator, I think we didn't have any discrepancies based on the amount that you said, 120. We had none.
Yeah. Because, that's really what this 0.5% BPT rollback is going to end up costing us just in this budget cycle. In the first year, it cost us $40 million. This year, it's going to cost us $80 million for that rollback. What can we have done with $120 million more? We're talking about all these programs and things that are unfunded, and we're trying to duck the accountability by saying, well, the governor can make those hard choices about what it is to cut. Well, we're the legislature. We're the ones with the power of the purse. We're the ones with the power of the purse. And if we are going to be the body that cuts our revenue and reduces the BPT, then let's stand on that. Let's not hide behind the governor with her awesome magical governor wand, can use her transfer authority to fill any gaps that we are just leaving in this budget. Because we want to do the tax cuts and the rollback. We don't have the courage to make the hard choices on the line items of the budget. We just want to leave it to the governor. Talk up how much power this governor has to do these things. Consider the rhetoric that you use today, my colleagues in this body who are running for governor. Maybe someday you will be sitting in that chair. And will we be hearing the same thing then? That transfer authority is actually funding the government? Let's be honest with ourselves on what we're doing here. We have an increasing amount of problems piling up. I hear there might be another storm development on the horizon. Chances are we could be being hit with another storm coming through our area, and we might not come up so lucky in the future. Heaven forbid, knock on wood. The world is getting increasingly more chaotic. We're going through real cost of living problems, and this reduction of revenue is rearing its ugly head in these discussions. Every time we're having these conversations about what's not being funded this year, think about that. The one decision to roll back the BPT, that's rearing $120 million worth of holes since its implementation. And I get if you want to use that BPT for specific things. You want to dedicate that to infrastructure. You want to dedicate that to the hospital. You want to dedicate that to whatever, fine. But don't cut off the permanent funding source by giving away a permanent tax cut. We're still in this budget negotiation. There's still time to plug a lot of these holes by just going back to the previous status quo.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, and currently tracking 88 million excess revenue this year, doing pretty well. Senator Montanani, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also support the reduction, the half-point reduction in the BPT. I think it's shown that the sky did not fall. Like you said, there's $80 million in excess revenue. But what I don't, it's not that I don't agree, because it is a fact that the governor does have that 50% transfer authority, and we don't have to wait for the governor to transfer money where things are where we need money and where we need funding. But for Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center and just healthcare in general, public safety, education, those are, to me, the priorities, as well as the economy. And so what this budget does, it gives us a say. And like the previous speaker said, we do control the purse strings. So we prioritize, how the people's money is being spent. And so that's why I was kind of surprised with what they're receiving and some of the amendments that were asked by Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center regarding the $1.5 million to GBWIC for Level 2 residential services for individuals with serious mental illness with or without an intellectual disability. The amount covers the 24-hour residential services for these clients, as well as the drop-in center known as Sagan Mommy. And this was in the latter part of June when I submitted these amendments. Appropriation, notwithstanding any other provision of law, the sum of 1.5 is hereby appropriated, this is the amendment, to the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center for 24-hour therapeutic group home residential services for children and adolescents with serious emotional disturbances. And then when was that OFB pre-budget meeting with Guam Behavioral? It's okay, there wasn't one. It was during the budget, not budget, but an oversight hearing that my colleagues are referencing, that we had learned that public health was going to discontinue providing federal grant money from the Child Care Development Fund. And this funding source is going to discontinue as of September 30th. And it was then when they revealed to us that that meant $4 million in federal grant money through a sub-grant to Guam Behavioral was no longer going to be available to them. And again, that was for the Mobile Crisis Response Team. That was $977,000. Family Stabilization Services, $391,000. Children's Home-Based Services, $418.8 $1,000. Autism services, $1.4 million. Therapeutic group home step down, that's $750,000. And so this budget, I know and I get what you're saying, that it was funded by federal grant money, and it really is our decision if we want to continue providing local funds. And so that's a priority for me, anything that has to do with healthcare, education, public safety, and the economy. But this mobile crisis response team, and it was actually one of my colleagues who brought it up during that oversight hearing, that is something that is mandated in local law. Let me find it because I saved it. It is in Guam Statute 10 GCA Chapter 86, the authority for a mobile crisis response team. It was launched in 2022 by the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration. So again, this was a local program that was funded by federal grant money, and now we have the opportunity to say that this is a priority, all of this is a priority. We have an opportunity to say that we need to keep this mobile crisis response team because it responds to mental health and substance abuse crises in the community. Its mission is to de-escalate, stabilize, and reduce system utilization. We have an opportunity to say, yes, family stabilization services is a priority because it provides behavioral health services to justice-involved youth and also provides presence at CPS Emergency Shelter and the Department of Youth Affairs. We have an opportunity to say, yes, we prioritize children's home-based services. It provides in-home behavioral health supports and therapeutic interventions. This budget gives us a priority to say, we support providing autism services to more than 3,500 families. We have an opportunity to say, yes, that we support providing therapeutic group home services, which my time is up, but I think you get
Mr. Chair, I yield the rest of my time to Senator.
Thank you. You have 5 additional minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. We have an opportunity to say yes, that we support therapeutic group home. That means that's 10 additional beds for CPS-involved youth for intensive psychiatric treatment, 24-hour therapeutic group home for children and adolescents with serious emotional disturbance. And I actually had a meeting with a group of mothers with autistic adults. And they'd gone through the system with DISID, but they aged out and they're adults now, but they really can't find any services here on Guam. And some of these programs here that are in here, that are in the budget, I don't see how it's enough. And I really hope that when we get to the miscellaneous provisions and some of the amendments that are proffered there, we say, yes, we care and we want to help our people who are suffering of mental illnesses, people with disabilities, with mental disabilities. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and we look forward to that section and affirmative votes on those amendments. Senator Bora.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'm trying to wrap my head around, I know we're on healthcare, but really just the budget process, right? We talk about the 0.5% that we did last year, the 0.5% we're proposing now, how it's affecting, or at least some of the decisions we made that led us to where we're at with the current budget, the substitute version of the bill. And I think somebody asked this earlier, whether or not, what was the budget 2 fiscal years ago when it was at 5%? And was this legislature, the body at that time, able to fund every single thing that was a priority? Because I'm trying to understand whether or not, even if it was at 5%, would we all be sitting here today, Steve? Do you think we would be sitting here pleased with the funding levels for every, as we go through the rest of the chapters?
Yes, Senator. Going back to maybe as far back as FY24, they actually had 4 contracts they implement in 24. Those same 4 contracts were carried over into FY25 and into FY26. In the FY27 budget, they're asking for additional contracts, contractual services for 27. Every year since FY24, we've increased their budget. So it's we're trying to keep up pace. We're trying to increase it and give them the funding needed to at least maintain what they had, at least in the current year and at least comparable to the previous fiscal year. But in 27, they're asking, I think, 2 or 3 million more over the FY26 appropriation.
So I guess my follow-up question is, and I know we've done this over the last year, because last year we went through the budget cycle. We were threatened that the sky was going to fall. We've come in here many times to appropriate additional funding to support. Are you confident, or do you believe, based on the tracking, or at least of the conservative budget that we have, that we'd be able to do a supplemental to support any shortfalls that may come up? I mean, I know you've been saying over and over the last couple of days that you're confident with your conversations with the agency contacts, maybe not the directors, that the agencies will make it work. But are you confident with the conservative budget that we had that we'll be able to support any of the emergencies? I think we've done a decent job over the last year with everything that's come up, and this body has been able to support it. But what are your thoughts based on the budget that is here before us and moving forward?
I hope the revenue tracking and the final revenue numbers, at least that materialized over the last 4 years, is an indication and proof that we're doing, the government is tracking well, is giving the government the ability to fund projects and what have you that come up that wasn't even part of the budget act itself. So as we move on after the fiscal year starts, we've been given the opportunity to fund a lot of things that weren't even thought of in the Budget Act, but are just as important, just as critical, and just as urgent. So having generated excess revenues over the last 4 years, I think, and I hope, and I honestly believe it will continue in FY27.
With some of the priorities that have been raised, at least in the last couple of days, do you think there are other areas in the budget that we could probably move some money from to support some of these? And I know you did your best to try and meet every agency. When we talk about, for me, like when we look at budgets and we look at priorities, right? We look at what is priority and what is urgent. I mean, do you think that there's some areas in the budget, and I know you did your best to try and fund every agency in their ask, but do you think that there's areas there or some other areas in the budget that we can move money from to support, like public safety, education, healthcare, and the government will still be okay and the sky will not fall?
Senator, the allocation of the revenues that we have adopted in the S bill, I think, was allocated based on our best ability, knowing what we had at the time. My priority, my position, my outlook on certain things may differ from others, and I'm sure they will. I'm just saying that what's in the S bill is our allocation from OFB based on all the information we had at the time when we developed it. If the body feels to reprogram some of those monies, that's the prerogative of the body. But if you're asking me if there's areas that we can move, again, I've already set my goals and basically what I feel is important, and I'd like to kind of maintain that. But it's not to say that it cannot be changed. I just also want to make it clear. It was around maybe a month later, other than today. For the last 3 years, we've come, at least for me, I've come here, actually the last 7, but more particularly the last 3 or 4 years. And I've come to this legislature, this hall, and presented a budget. And time again, every senator asked me the question, whether or not I feel the appropriation level given to the departments are adequate to cover all the expenses. And I honestly felt at the time, every year, I said yes. Well, at the end of the year, it proved that what I said was correct. It proved in FY25 what I said was correct. Every department in the government of Guam, with the exception of 2, lapsed. But when we first started the fiscal year, I was criticized all over the place that what we appropriated was insufficient to cover program costs, and I said no. But again, you're asking me the same question today. Do I feel it's adequate? Most definitely. This is my work, this is my presentation, it's my budget, but it's not final. It's up to the body to decide how the final allocation of revenues are to be determined, and I'm okay with that. I've done my work. It's up to you guys to do what you want to do.
Thank you. That was going to be my last question. Were you confident that the allocations that you have in this substitute version was going to keep the government operating to the end of the fiscal year? So thank you for that. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no further questions.
Senator Bora. Ranking member, we're going to take a 1-minute recess to reset the mics, and we'll be right back to you. Thank you. 1-minute recess. Fiscal year 27, we funded them at 2.5. That's correct. Additional programs, and this is why OFB keeps saying additional programs. Additional programs, mobile crisis, family stabilization, children homebound, autism sciences, therapeutic group home, $4 million for those additional programs were not in the EBR. So the talk of the EBR would have covered those programs is incorrect. They were not included in the EBR. Ranking Member Tina Rose Minya Barnes, you're recognized.
Mr. Chair, and hold on. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity on this round. Don't have too much questions, but I just want to maybe make sure I get this for the record, because as we look at the general fund appropriations for behavioral health, it's at $12,863,325, and then from the Healthy Futures funds, it's at $8,287,934 for a total of $21,151,259. I want to note that as the criticalness of all the programs that come in here, I wanted to note like the contracts that you noted from the detoxification, rehabilitation, the focus on the live suicide and all that you had just mentioned being new forms. I want to say that there have been programs that the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center have been managing for many, many years, and one that comes to mind is the Laddie Treatment Center, which has had a contract with behavioral health for over 21 years, and so is Gumamami is. I know that me, Robert Hoffman, and a lot of other folks in the community have been a part of that for almost 3 decades, if not over 3 decades, that is a part of this program too. And as I look at the funding sources here that's being provided, I know that I can't speak it now because we're not in the right section, but I want to note for the record that I am working with a colleague or two to see the amendments that are going to be put in the other provision to look at the programs that may have been shortchanged, at least for this. And, you know, some may agree with me, some may not. I see some funny faces coming my way, but, you know, I'm going to give it a shot. But behavioral health, Mr. Chair, is a very, very critical agency. I want to thank the director, the deputy, and all the staff there. And a lot of the programs that they do, our constituents have no control. A lot of what we have there with behavioral health is a lot of court-ordered programs that we must abide with. So I'm going to continue to listen. I know that there's several more colleagues that need to speak, but I will note for the record that there are a couple of colleagues that I'm working with to see the other programs that have been around for more than 2 decades that need to be funded sufficiently, so that I will tackle that when that time comes. So thank you for letting me speak briefly on this chapter. Si Dusmasi.
Dusmasi, Ranking Member Tina Rose Munoz Barnes. Senator San Agustin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I like to echo also the sentiments of majority of the colleagues that have spoken already. The shortfall. But exactly like the previous speaker mentioned, we're not at the appropriate chapter. And I understand your stand that to stick with the budget we presented and we'll deal with what adjustment we need to make at the appropriate chapter. And I agree with you. You mentioned earlier 88 million surplus. Great. I see half of that, or just a little bit over half, available. That could be available. And I think at that point, then that's when we should discuss, and because it doesn't impact the budget. It covers the shortfall that everyone seems to be talking about. And I can understand where they come from. But we got to do this. We got to take care of the budget, deal in the appropriate chapter, address it, then we can move on. And I think everybody will be happy because we're going to come to terms. Because I heard you say that when we're at that appropriate chapter, you're comfortable with it, because then your real job is almost done already. And then we can move on. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I have nothing else to say. I'm just going to wait and listen and wait for the appropriate chapter. Thank you.
Senator San Agustin. Vice Speaker Ada.
Nothing on this chapter. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Senator Shelley Cabo.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really have nothing to ask, but I just want to remind this body that it doesn't look good on all of us if we will shortchange the people of Guam, the most vulnerable. And I know that the presiding speaker mentioned that there is still a chance to adjust things in a proper, appropriate chapter, but let's just be mindful of our situation right now, wherein we cannot underfund or shortchange critical services and people that are, or individuals or groups that are truly in need. That's all I have to say. I have no questions in this particular segment for you, Mr. Steve. It will come up later. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Susmansi, Senator Cabo. So, colleagues, we have completed part 3 of chapter 3. So we are now in part 4 of chapter 3, which is going to be the last part in this chapter, and it is DISID, Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, Steve, I guess we should have done this to begin with, but and let's start first with DISID here. And if you can provide the information for the other agencies that were in this chapter, what are their lapses? Or what do we anticipate their lapses to be?
For DISID, as of the May CER report, they're tracking about 91,000. In September of FY25, they lapsed 625,000. And in the FY24 audit, they lapsed 614,000.
Can you repeat that again?
For May CER report? Oh, the last one?
Repeat the whole thing again. I'm sorry.
Yes. For May CER, 91,000.
Okay.
For September CER, which is 25, it's 625,000. And for the 24 audit lapse is 614,000.
Just for the edification, well, with mental health, what was their lapses?
For mental health, as of the May CER report, we're tracking at 903,000.
How much?
903.
Okay.
For September 25, it's 2 million. And for the FY24 audit lapse showed 347,000.
Okay. And I do remember you did give for public health, so I'm not going to ask for that one. Okay. Now let's go with DISID. In comparison to the EBR, and in comparison to what they received in the last budget, where does this proposal land? First off, let's comparison with EBR.
I believe, Senator, it's approximately 500,000 is the difference.
More or less?
More.
So we're giving them $500,000 more.
No, that's the difference between the FY26 and the agency's request. What we're giving them in the OFB is 253,000. That's what they said.
So they're getting more. That's...
Oh, wait. Let me correct myself here. For the FY26 appropriation level, it's 3.8 million.
Okay.
For the FY27 EBR request, it's 8.2. There is a variance of 4.4 million.
Okay, that's the EBR.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what was the actual in 26 and the proposed in 27?
The actual for 26 is 3.8.
Okay.
And then the increase that we gave over the FY26 is 253,000.
So about 3.8 plus
4.4 mil, 4.1.
Okay. You know, as in this, as well as with the previous, was there any indication of programs that were received or that they had implemented during the COVID ARP era that all of a sudden now is trying to jump over to the general fund area and that they want us to fund?
Senator, I would have to look back at least a couple of years to see if any one of those programs that they're operating now were actually funded out of federal grants, and those grants expired, and either were over either the last year, 2 years, or how far back was absorbed to the general fund.
And the reason I'm asking this is because I'm listening to the discussion, and it's going to be a discussion in this agency as it was in other agencies. You know, that we're not funding these programs. These programs are necessary. And if I can recall correctly, and I'm sure that your staff will be able to validate, is that these were in fact programs that were brought on during this era, during this time frame, with the warning that this was for those specific purpose, for specific time period, and that we're not going to be able to fund it afterwards unless we do something about it. And now there's a cry that, oh, it's necessary, we have to continue it. You know, and sitting here and I'm looking at, you know, thank you very much for the comparison of documents, you know, the information provided in the EBR. And there are programs that were funded as a result of grants or programs that were started with the utilization of CARES and ARP money, and now all of a sudden becomes an obligation of the government. And now they look to you, and they're blaming you, and they're blaming us for not funding it. It was never meant to be that way. And there was never a plan to continue it, other than, oh, just throw it into the budget and they're going to fund it. And then we're forgetting where it comes from. So thank you for continuing to stand the ground on this thing, but I see where you're coming from. And there are programs that didn't exist before, or because they were funded otherwise, and now that the funding has gone, all of a sudden it becomes an obligation for us. So just to end this here, for this, it's close to, over the last 3 fiscal years, $1.3 million in excess funds. And funds they did not that's a predicate, to predicate any discussion about, oh, we're not funding them to the levels they need. We have been funding them to the levels they need, and they never used it. Now that we're trying to right-size it, we're in a big, bad business. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Seduce Masi, Vice Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to talk on DISID. So, Mr. Guerrero, may I remind you that you're under oath here today?
I believe my swearing in is continuing to today, yes.
Okay. Because we're hearing from the director of DISID, and she's telling us that at no time did they inform the Office of Finance and Budget that they were applying for federal grants funding for direct services to supplement local funding, specific for in-home care services. They also say that the program that we were just discussing was never funded federally. It's always been funded locally.
Well, Senator, it appears that now what's happening is that it's coming down to who said what.
Yeah. That's why, again, we should have the agencies in here.
So
Because,
that's
I don't
why
want to have to play this game where, he said, she said. I don't want to. But when he said one thing and she said that's not true, what position does that put us in trying to craft a budget that truly serves our people?
Well, the only response I'm going to give you, Senator, is information we receive from the agency. We can verify it, and that's it.
Vice Speaker, can I make a motion to bring in DISID?
At the onset of the committee to hold, the rules have already been established by the chair, so we're going to keep with those rules of engagement.
So I can't make the motion?
You can make a motion.
Yeah, I am. I'm making a motion to bring in DISID, and specifically for the reason that it appears we're receiving conflicting information from Mr. Guerrero, who I know is one of, you guys pretty much say he's one of you. So I'm not questioning that, but I do, again, want a different perspective from some of the people who lead these agencies who are definitely going to be impacted, even though we keep saying, oh, we're funding them sufficiently. So that's my motion, sir.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to bring in DISID. All those in favor of the motion to bring in DISID, please signify by raising your hand. There's an objection. All those in favor? Motion fails.
Okay. I think, the people, those of them who know that we're in here on a Sunday watch and they see what's happening here is this need to over-explain why we're shortchanging the most vulnerable in our community with this substitute budget, whether it's the kids with autism, people who are trying to take their own lives, Guam Mommy Group Home, or DISID. We're talking about an agency that serves individuals with disabilities. And the reason why these agencies are coming in short, we're not having these critical programs funded, is because of the business privilege tax rollback. No matter what you say, we're approaching this budget with this mentality from the majority that we have to take care of the big businesses first. Those struggling with addiction, kids with autism, those who have suicidal ideations, individuals with disabilities, they're supplemental to this budget process. They are an afterthought. They take a back seat because the first order of business is to take another $40 million off the top of this fiscal year to give it to big businesses who already got a $40 million cut in the previous fiscal year. And so now we're doing all this verbal gymnastics and painting this narrative that all of these agencies have lapses, so they're okay. Because they have so many mandates to meet. Some of them, a lot of them apparently were not able to spend all the money we budgeted for them. But it's my understanding when you go and you talk to these agencies, although the Republican majority is trying to paint this image that these lapsed funds, it's like the dragon in the cave sitting on top of all the gold coins. And that's not the case. A lot of these so-called lapsed funds are earmarked or obligated, are for projects that maybe because of staffing shortages or procurement delays or whatever, these agencies weren't able to get around to spending that money. And so all of this is necessary because the first order of business is they have to defend giving $40 million to the big businesses. And we'll just try and figure out everything else because that was the first order of business. And what we're hearing from these agencies is that critical services are not going to be funded. Vulnerable members of our community are going to be left out in the cold because you guys wanted to roll it back another 0.5%. And that means $40 million less on the table to fund things that absolutely serve the most vulnerable in our community.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. Senator Chalahi, any questions on Chapter 3, Part 4?
Yes, thank you.
You're recognized.
So, BBMR reminded us that the current substitute budget bill as came out of the committee reduced funding for DSID by $1.8 million versus the executive budget request. So, but OFB is saying, but they did increase from last year's budget by $253,000. Can you tell us, what would be the organic increase of this agency without increasing any programs or any enrollment in any of their programs? Meaning, I think you've explained that to us before, to be just with the same employees, going to the next year with their increments and all that.
The organic growth, Senator, that we normally apply to annual budgets are costs such as personnel, increments, adjustment in retirement, adjustment in the benefits. We also make some adjustments to retrend at least utilities, and basically that's really all that we consider in terms of organic growth.
All right, so what would that have been for this agency?
What is the organic growth?
Yes.
For this alone is 60,000.
Okay, so you gave them about 90,000 more than that, right? 100? Yeah, about 100,000 more than what their organic growth would have been. So $100,000. But what they were really asking for was, in the 1.8 million increase, was because they are at 141 in their in-home care stipends program, 141 people, that's a high demand, and they want to expand that program. So that's part of what they wanted the 1.8 million for. They also run a 24-hour residential care center for adults, and they run a central adult daycare center. Those, again, are also, I think, full capacity. They wanted to open a southern daycare center for adults. That's what they wanted an additional $250,000 for. So with this budget, they will not be able to expand the adult daycares to the south. They will not be able to expand from any current clients their in-home care stipends. I don't know if you've heard any of these hearings that we've had with DSID, but they are, I mean, the constituents or the customers of DSID that come in, the clients that come in and ask, for us to help, a lot of it is for this in-home care expansion. They also asked for an increase in the local match for the Division of Voc Rehab. So it looks like that some of this that they wanted to expand, and they were under high criticism. I don't know if you remember this when they were here. We are demanding, I think the people are demanding of them. I mean, the public really reacted to that oversight hearing because they want more services for people with disabilities in our community. They want to take care of our adults who require daycare center programs or benefit from those things. And so again, it was a $1.8 million that they were looking for to increase in their budget. And I guess I'm just going to state on the record, yeah, my concern with this term that we are going to right-size DSID, I think we have underserved our persons with disabilities on Guam for years, and we are trying so hard to expand services with DSID, and it's a direct correlation between how many they can serve, mostly with contracts, in these programs, and the money that we give them. So I think right-sizing services to persons with disabilities in our community would be increasing that way beyond, $100,000 a year. I mean, I think they've done a good job at justifying what they're going to spend this on. And I think the people of the South would be very, it's not even happy. It's a relief to know that they're going to get some easier way to take care of our manamko by bringing them to a center that is so much closer to the people of the South. It's cutting the travel time. And so, yeah, I objected that we didn't find enough money for the DSID.
Thank you, Senator Chalayi. Senator Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker. Yeah, I just want to echo some of the sentiments of the retiring speaker that there is these shortfalls in these services for vulnerable people. And I agree with her. If we're talking about right-sizing these programs, it should be to expand and fund them more, not to provide less. Like, there is a trend I'm noticing where we run into some questions about funding for this agency and that agency and whether it'll be enough. And, inevitably comes to the point of, yeah, we'll have a supplemental budget or a supplemental session for it, and we'll take care of it later. And when I think about these services that this provides and other agencies with similar mandates, is that rather than putting them onto the back burner with we should be prioritizing them. Instead of putting them in the back burner with supplemental hearings and supplemental budgets and we'll see what we have available at the end of the year, we should be putting them front and center because they don't grow at incredibly big rates. Their growth is still at a very manageable level. And so I think that it's valuable for our community to have these extra services because a little bit of these services goes a long way for some of these villages, especially down in the South, that is very lacking in a lot of care. We are lacking in a lot of the tools and resources we need. Yeah, sure, okay, we've done a great shell game and everything is properly funded on paper. But we all know we have more problems that we could use more money to fix. There is an unlimited amount of problems. And it feels like just as you're solving one, more of them pop up. And that's why I just feel it's so damaging for us to be taking permanent cuts to our long-term revenue sources, especially in the midst of a massive military buildup. At what point do we take advantage of it before it takes advantage of us? I don't know. But we're seeing the effects of us not taking the right steps towards extracting a fair value, because we're seeing it in the shortages of services where we have to throw up our hands and say, we don't know what to cut. We'll just leave it up to the governor, let her use her transfer authority, because we can't or won't do it. And so, no, I'm very impressed with the work that DISA does. They're not a very big agency, but I do think they do important work, and we dismiss them or right-size them at our own peril. And I hope that as we go through these questions and answers, like some of my colleagues in the majority see that even among their own agencies, that there's needs that are not being met, that should be able to be met, that could be met. What could we do with $120 million more? Because, you know, with the 0.5% over the course of 2 years, that's $80 million. We're looking to add another $40 million to that with another reduction of the BPT. $120 million. I'm not saying it's going to solve all of our problems, because we've already shown through just our long history that once you solve one problem, more pops its head up. But we're never going to do it with less resources. We need more to do more. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. Senator Mantanani, you're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be yielding my time to the Oversight Chair of DISID, who I will say has done a wonderful job in her oversight, considering the fact that she held an oversight hearing over DISID and had an opportunity to hear from them themselves. And it was an oversight hearing. It was the first time that was held in 6 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mantanani. Senator Lujan. Ranking Member Muñoz-Barnes. Any questions, comments on DISID?
Not at this time, Vice Speaker. I know that some of the concerns were brought up earlier in reference to the federal grants that are not being able to be tapped with the government. So those are the things that we're looking at this time.
Thank you, Ranking Member Muñoz-Barnes.
Thank you.
Senator San Augustine.
Mr. Chairman, as I stated earlier on the previous part, there's an appropriate chapter to discuss the shortfalls that we're going to see on all the agencies. I will wait until that time.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Senator Calvo, you're recognized, ma'am. You have your Senator Mantanani yielded her time for 5 minutes, so you have 10 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and dear colleagues, obviously we know that we're confronted with, I know this is only one section of this whole budget, and I understand that we're trying to balance everything, but we cannot shortchange DISID by $1.8 million. Their initiatives, their programs will crumble down. We already know that. You know, one of my colleagues mentioned earlier about the oversight. Yes, we haven't had an oversight in a while. And in the last oversight about a month and a half ago, it yielded good results from 15 partners, local business partners. DISID is up to 56 local partners. DISID is doing a good job. At this current state, colleagues, please, at this current state, DISID have to cut hours and days already in-home services at this current budget. So can you imagine, dear colleagues and people of Guam, if we do not provide this 1.8 additional funding, a lot of these services, this in-home service will suffer, will fall apart. Right now, what they're trying to do is expand. We need to expand in the southern villages. Why? Because they cannot come around here. Most of them don't have means of transportation. We don't have reliable transportation in our island. We need to open up. We need to support them. How much are they asking? 200,000+, and we can't give it to them? This 1.8 million is critical. Critical because right now, there's a lot of individuals who need in-home assistance, a line of them, who could not be accommodated. You know what this does to accommodate them? We had to cut hours. We have to cut days with the existing client to be able to accommodate new ones. If we clip their wings, if we do not fund them, what happens? There's no progress. And didn't we all run because we want to have a progressive Guam? Didn't we run because we wanted to be public servants? By underfunding critical services, we are not being a good public servant. These critical services must be supported. It must. 1.8 million is a lot of money. If we are able to fund and push millions and millions of dollars in other agencies that otherwise we should ask to tighten belts, then we can find a $1.8 million for DSID to assist our most vulnerable constituents here in our island. This is a time to step up to the plate, colleagues. We cannot underfund them by $1.8 million. That is a lot. This agency is one of the heart agencies. The heart. If we cannot assist this agency, then where is our heart? I don't know, colleagues, but I cannot sit here knowing that the most vulnerable population of Guam will be left behind. We have veterans here. We talk about, I'm not from military background, but I know military. We don't leave anyone behind. But this budget, this plan to award this much, shortened by 1.8, is clearly leaving the most vulnerable behind. Now, I cannot sit here and accept that. I'm sorry. This is not how we will represent the people of Guam. This is not how we should be as public servants. I'm so disappointed. I've been through this last year. I encourage all of you, my dear colleagues, to come here at my table. Look at my notes here. All my agencies, / status quo, / status quo, status quo, / This is not even fair anymore. I know that we're trying to budget the budget, but the budget is not budgeting. The math is not mathing. I cannot sit here and see that we're going to push millions and millions of dollars in agencies, and then we are going to shortchange critical ones. I cannot.
anymore. We need to do something about this. This is not fair. I'm not even asking for fair anymore. What I'm asking for is what is right. What is right. Not to right size, but what is right. We need to do what is right. Dear colleagues, we're only in chapter 3. Can you imagine how many more times I will have to go through this with all my other oversights? We're only in chapter 3. I know we want to wrap this up. But how am I going to agree with this when I know that the heart and the soul of this government, and I'm talking about the agencies, the heart and the souls, are going to be treated as such? Where's our heart and soul then? Does this budget speak of the heart and the soul? No, it does not. This is not fair. This is not balanced. In some areas, sure, I will agree. I know, I understand it's not easy to budget. But at least let's be fair. Let's do the right thing. $1.8 million. If we can give 5, 10, 14, 20 millions to other agencies, then we can find the $1.8 million for DSID. I'm going to proffer an amendment. My dear colleagues, please, I beg you, please support it. I have nothing further to say. I have to save my energy for my other oversight. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Senator Calvo.
And I'd like to also thank Senator Montanani for yielding her time. Appreciate it, Senator.
Senator Tadigui, you're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And since we've been here, I've never heard Senator Calvo speak so passionately and fighting for her agency, and done so well. I hope it does hit everyone's heart. DSID is not one of those, sexy agencies. Neither is Guam Behavioral Wellness. These are agencies that are always left behind and are the last to be given anything or the scraps on the table. And is this what this budget did? I do have a question, though. Did you have a pre-budget meeting, Steve, with DSID?
No, we did not have a pre-budget meeting with the agencies, but were in contact with them via phone and email.
Well, I'm sure my colleagues have mentioned the text messages that we got when there was a comment that was made last night about DSID. And they said, no, that's not true. I'm almost afraid to ask you anything, Steve, because we're hearing it's fine if it's one person, saying that he's not telling the truth. He's not being forthright. But we have 3 agencies. 3. And every time you say that you've spoken to someone or you've done your due diligence, which actually you haven't, because I did ask about your due diligence when it comes to getting a hold of, taking the extra step, collaborating with these agencies. And I've been here just as long as you have, Steve, and watched these agencies like DSID, Guam Behavioral Wellness, and other agencies just being neglected, and it needs to stop. We can't wait until the end of a year to see how much excess revenue we have at the end of the year to give them what they were due the whole entire year. That has to stop. Last year in FY26, What was the ask from DISIT last year? What was the ask? Not what you appropriated, what we appropriated, but what was the ask? From the general fund. We know that this year it was 2,329,297 million is what they got. But what was the ask last year for the FY26?
I'm getting that information, Senator.
You know, Steve, for the sake of the time, and I know my colleagues are waiting, I did ask the Oversight Chair that what they asked for the FY26 budget with this year, they did not get what they asked for again. And again, we shortchanged them, like we're doing this time around. So, this work over the past year has definitely reflected the deep commitment and the dignity and independence and inclusion of individuals with disability. That's the work they do. They bring them dignity. They work on providing independence for them. Recent reports also highlighted a major progress expanding in-home care services that was brought up, strengthening vocational rehabilitation for students and adults, and opening a Guam First Adult Daycare Center to provide safe structural support for these families who need it the most. They've donated wheelchairs, improved residential care, ensuring that no one was left behind. So we too not need to leave them behind, as we've been doing for years. So I ask too, as a supporting of the amendment that the Oversight Chair has for DISIT, to give them the money they need and stop this, transfer authority stuff. That's not right. It's our obligation to give these agencies what they need to work with. Because if we can sit back here and saying, well, the governor has 50% transfer, what money is she going to take from to give to that other agency that needs it? Where is she going to shortchange for another agency? We're actually going to make her do that? No, this is our responsibility as a legislature to create a budget that's fair and appropriate the funding to them for that fiscal year and not wait to the end of the year. That's what we were voted in this body to do, not pass the buck. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Teitigui. Colleagues, that concludes Chapter 3 with Part 4 of DISID. We're going to go ahead and go on to the amendments. We're going to take a 2-minute recess.
I think now is a good time to stop our coverage here. Those pleas by Senator Sabrina Salas Matsanani and Senator Shelley Calvo, I hope that they have been taken into consideration by the rest of their Republican colleagues who have been pretty hell-bent about reducing the BPT from 4.5 to 4%. And while those two senators didn't say they were against it, the math would work out in their argument's favor if the BPT was not reduced from 4.5 to 4%, so that there were enough revenues. So that, as you heard Senator Shelley Calvo, an impassioned plea, she said it's $1.8 million. That might not be a lot to some of these other agencies or to some of the other projects that the majority has deemed to be priorities, but $1.8 million to a small agency like DISIT is quite a lot of money and would do wonders for some of the most vulnerable in our community. And she has been a consistent advocate for those most vulnerable. You heard Senator Sabrina Salas Matsanani, who has been a fierce advocate for her agencies, Guam Memorial Hospital, Department of Public Health, wondering, I feel bad for her because you're wondering whether, as she's talking, like one of the things that comes up is the Republican majority hanging her out to dry here? Have they screwed her over? And you can almost hear the trepidation in her voice, wondering if that's what's going on. And not because it's her, but because of the agencies that she's fighting for. And let me just repeat for something that I've been saying since yesterday. I don't think it's wrong for these senators who made this promise in 2020 in the 2024 election to reduce the BPT. It's not wrong for people to keep their promises, especially when their promises don't hurt other people, right? Or definitely because when their promises don't hurt other people. But maybe it was wrong to make the promise to begin with without fully understanding what that promise meant. And what that promise means, at least in the discussion that's going on today, is $40 million in fewer revenues. And now you hear what that means in terms of public services. But also, as we talk about who's getting screwed over here, let's not forget who wins here. And the allegation is that the people who come out on top here are not even Guamanians. They're large corporations that have made a temporary home here so that they can take advantage of a military buildup that continues to take advantage of the regular, ordinary, everyday people of Guam who, unless you are somehow delivered from this economic regression because of some transaction that you have with the people in power now, are suffering, struggling, trying to make ends meet, while the legislature is about to give away $40 million to the largest corporations doing business here, most of whom aren't even from here. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. Let's continue this conversation tonight during the Troy Torres Show. In the meantime, I got lots of work to do, lots of things to do. You all have a fantastic day, and thank you so much for joining me for the past 3 hours. God bless you.
We delivered. Guam Autospot is extending our overstock sell-off with the hottest deals on island, like our 2025 GMC Canyon with $4,000 off. Or slide into a brand new Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, starting at just $24,995. September is your chance to drive big and save even bigger. Visit us today or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com or call 478-AUTO. Guam Autospot, where the savings never stop.